صلوات. أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. والليل إذا يغشى والنهار إذا تجلى وما خلق الذكر والأنثى إن سعيكم لشتى فأما من أعتى واتقى وصدق بالحسنى فسنيسره لليسرى وأما من بخل واستغنى وكذب بالحسنى فسنيسره للعسرى وما يغني عنه ماله إذا تردى إن علينا للهدى وإن لنا للآخرة والأولى فأنذرتكم نارا تلظى لا يصلاها إلا الأشقى الذي كذب وتولى وسيجنبها الأتقى الذي يؤتي ماله يتزكى وما لأحد عنده من نعمة تجزى إلا ابتغاء وجه ربه الأعلى ولسوف يرزى. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. والضحى والليل إذا سجى ما ودعك ربك وما قلى وللآخرة خير لك من الأولى ولسوف يعطيك ربك فترزى. ألم يجدك يتيما فآوى ووجدك ضالا فهدى ووجدك عائلا فأغنى فأما اليتيم فلا تقهر وأما السائل فلا تنهر وأما بنعمة ربك فحدث. صدق الله العلي العظيم. الفاتحة.
محمد و آل محمد صلوات. اے شمر ذرا کچھ رحم تو کھا یہ چھوٹی زہرا ہے معصوم سکینہ ہے معصوم سکینہ ہے نہ مار اسے نازوں سے اسے شبیر نے پالا ہے معصوم سکینہ ہے معصوم سکینہ ہے. سجاد کی بہنا کو غازی کی بھتیجی کو مانگا ہے کنیزی میں اس پھول سی بچی کو شہ نے اپنے سجدوں میں جسے اللہ سے مانگا ہے معصوم سکینہ ہے معصوم سکینہ ہے. دوڑیں گے اگر نہ کہ کس طرح سے سنبھلیں گی، گھر راہ میں گر جائے آواز کسے دے گی، پشتے ناکا پر کیوں تنہا رسی سے باندھا ہے، معصوم سکینہ ہے، معصوم سکینہ ہے۔ کیا جرم کیا اس نے، کیوں اس کو رلاتا ہے، دکھلا کے اسے پانی مٹی پہ بہاتا ہے، کیا تیری بھی اولاد نہیں، کیوں ظلم یہ داتا ہے، معصوم سکینہ ہے، معصوم سکینہ ہے۔ رونے نہ دیا اس کو بابا کے لاشے پر، ہے نیل تماچوں کے معصوم کے چہرے پر، اللہ جانے یہ اس پہ ستم کس بات کا بدلہ ہے، معصوم سکینہ ہے، معصوم سکینہ ہے۔ ایک رات سرے زنداں شبیر کا سر آیا، سر لے کر گودی میں بچی نے کیا نوحہ، آنکھیں کھولو بابا دیکھو یہ کون ضعیفہ ہے، معصوم سکینہ ہے، معصوم سکینہ ہے۔ معصومہ کی گردن میں باندھی ہے رسن ایسے، گھت جائیں گا دم اس کا، اور میں تیز چلوں کیسے، یہ کہتا ہوا بیمار میرا کم ہو کر چلتا ہے، معصوم سکینہ ہے، معصوم سکینہ ہے۔ محمد وآل محمد صلوات۔
بر محمد وآل محمد صلوات۔ سکائے حرم رکھ لینا برم، سکائے حرم رکھ لینا برم، ہم در پہ تمہارے آئے ہیں، تم بھی نہیں ہم کو ٹھکرانا، تم بھی نہیں ہم عباس عباس یا ابوالفضل العباس اب سارے سہارے ٹوٹ چکے ہمیں اپنے پرائے لوٹ چکے اب سارے سہارے ٹوٹ چکے ہمیں اپنے پرائے لوٹ چکے تمہیں اپنی پناہ ہو میں لے لو تمہیں اپنی پناہ ہو میں لے لو ہم غم سے بہت گھبرائے ہیں سقائے حرم رکھ لینا برم ہم در پہ تمہارے آئے ہیں اشکوں کی زباں پہچانتے ہو جو دل میں ہے وہ جانتے ہو اشکوں کی زباں پہچانتے ہو جو دل میں ہے وہ جانتے ہو ہم کہہ نہیں سکتے تم سن لو ہم کہہ نہیں سکتے تم سن لو بس ہاتھوں کو پہلائے ہے عباس عباس یا ابوالفضل العباس سقائے حرم رکھ لینا برم ہم در پہ تمہارے آئے ہیں ہر سونی گودی کھل جائے ہر بیٹی کو رشتہ مل جائے ہر سونی گودی کھل جائے ہر بیٹی کو رشتہ مل جائے ان چہروں کو رونق دے دو ان چہروں کو رونق دے دو جو غم کے سبب مر جائے ہے عباس عباس یا ابوالفضل العباس سقائے حرم رکھ لینا برم سقائے حرم رکھ لینا برم ہم در پہ تمہارے آئے ہیں مولا تم باب حوائج ہو روزے پہ انہیں بھی بلوا لو مولا تم باب حوائج ہو روزے پہ انہیں بھی بلوا لو غربت کی سبب جو آ نہ سکے غربت کی سبب جو آ نہ سکے سکائے حرم رکھ لے نہ برم سکائے حرم رکھ لے نہ برم ہم در پہ تمہارے آئے ہیں دربار سخی عباس کا تھا کچھ مانگنا تھا لازم مانگا دربار سخی عباس کا تھا کچھ مانگنا تھا لازم مانگا لیکن یہ حقیقت بھی ہے کمر لیکن یہ حقیقت بھی ہے کمر ہم پر سا دینے آئے ہیں سکائے حرم رکھ لے نہ برم سکائے حرم رکھ لے نہ برم ہم در پہ تمہارے آئے ہیں پر محمد وآل محمد صلوات
بر محمد و آل محمد صلوات اللہم صلی علی Rouhani Majlis announcements. Mourning. The bus Majlis has been sponsored by Sayyid Afzal Mehdi Sahib for the bar masik of his beloved mother Marhuma Aziz Fatima Ketki Begum. Also for the Salih Sawab of Marhuma Zainab Sadat Musawi, Marhum Sayyid Fazil Hussain, Marhum Sayyid Tafazul Hussain, Marhum Sayyid Ansar Hussain, and Kul Marhumin. Next Majlis is sponsored by Amir Ali Bhai Walji for the Salih Sawab of Marhum Muhammad Ali Bhai Walji, Marhuma Zainab Bhai Muhammad Ali Walji, Marhuma Kanize Fatima Muhammad Ali Walji, Marhum Mohsin Bhai Muhammad Ali Walji, and Kul Marhumins. Next Majlis has been sponsored by the family of Marhum Al-Haj Anwar Bhai Ali Bhai Jafar for the Salih Sawab of Marhum Anwar Bhai Ali Bhai Jafar, also for the Marhumins of Ali Bhai Jafar family and Kul Marhumins. The next Majlis has been sponsored for the Salih Sawab of Marhuma Sayyidah Hussain Ara Begum, Marhuma Nadia Tahira Binte Safraz Remtullah, Marhumins of Sayyid family, Marhumins of Latif Hussain family, Marhumins of Shah family, Marhumins of Remtullah family, and Kul Marhumins. You humbly requested Surah Fatiha for Kul Marhumins. Al-Fatiha. Bismillah. Bar Muhammadin wa ali Muhammad salawat. Allahumma salli ala Muhammadin wa ali. Mu'minin, the Haidari Arbaeen walk, which will be on Saturday and Sunday, the 4th of September 2022. Haidari Jamaat are honored to invite you to their second annual Najaf to Karbala walk. Experience a taste of what millions of Zawars do when walking between Najaf to Karbala on the Arbaeen of Imam Hussain alayhi salam. Allahumma salli ala Muhammadin wa ali Muhammad. Mu'minin, there will be a 1-minute video to be shown shortly to see what the walk entitles. We'll be showing it very shortly. Bar Muhammadin wa ali Muhammad salawat.
The Haydari Arbaeen walk, bringing the walk of love one step closer. For those that have been, this will fill your heart with memories, and for those that have not, it will give you a glimpse of what Karbala is like. The walk includes 18 mawaqib, starting with Najaf and Wadi as-Salam. It will include the khutbahs of Kulthum in Kufa, Sayyid Zainab in Sham, Imam Sajjad in Yazid's court, and various other mawaqibs exhibiting the tragedies of Karbala. Both Iraqi and Karakchai, Tabarruk with special mawaqib for resting, salat, and a special signing of the flag, which will be taken from Najaf to Karbala and presented to the shrine of Imam al-Hussain on everyone's behalf. They will also include what Imam Hussain means to me and a remembrance of Imam al-Hussain. The walk will take approximately 2 hours, ending with a reenactment of the Night of Grief, Sham-e Ghariban. A day not to be missed. Book your slots for free now on the 3rd or 4th of September via Instagram and the link on our website, www.haydari.org.uk, and Instagram, the Haydari Arbaeen Walk.
صلوا على محمد وآل محمد. وبحب الزهراء صلوا على محمد وآل محمد. سورة الفاتحة. أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. الحمد لله رب العالمين. الحمد لله الذي لا يبلغ مدحته القائلون ولا يحصي نعماءه العادون ولا يعد حقه المجتهدون، الذي لا يدرك بعد الهمم ولا يناله غوص الفطن، الذي ليس له صفته حد محدود ولا نعت موجود ولا وقت معدود ولا أجل ممدود. وما بعد، صلى الله على سيدنا مولانا حبيب الله العالمين وخاتم النبيين وخلق عظيم أبو القاسم المصطفى محمد. وصلى الله على من هو عند الرسول أخي وابن عمي ووسي ووارثي وموضع السر، أبو الحسنين مولى القونين إمام الثقلين يعصوب الدين رئيس الموحدين قائد الغر المحجلين والسيد المتقين أمير المؤمنين أسد الله الغالب غالب على كل غالب مذحر العجائب علي بن أبي طالب. وصلى الله على أهل بيته الطيبين الطاهرين المعصومين المظلومين، ولعنة الله على القوم الظالمين من الآن إلى يوم الدين. أما بعد، صلى الله عليك يا أبا عبد الله، صلى الله عليك يا ابن رسول الله، يا رحمة الله الواسعة، يا باب نجاة الأمة يا عبرة لكل مؤمن ومؤمنات يا غريب يا مظلوم كربلاء فيا ليتني يا ليتني كنا معكم سادتي فنفوز فوزا عظيما. أما بعد، قال الله الحكيم في محكم كتابه الكريم: بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. يا أيها الذين آمنوا اتقوا الله حق تقاته ولا تموتن إلا وأنتم مسلمون. صدق الله العلي العظيم. صلوات. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah. Assalamu alaikum. Our fourth Imam was Madhloom then, and he is Madhloom now. The oppression of the Imam during his lifetime was seen visibly in the chains which were put upon him, in the streets in which he was paraded, and in the censorship of his words. But the dhulm of the Imam today is in how little he is actually used in modern life, and indeed in the community itself. Imam Sajjad alayhi salam is not just a point to mention in Masa'ib, neither is he an afterthought in the Battle of Karbala, neither is he this, ill or sick, bimar vision of him we have made for ourselves to always reflect of him in this state. Imam Sajjad of our Imams has given us things no Imam has given us before or since. And Imam Sajjad has given us or at least opened up for us, one discussion which no Imam before or since has done so in that same way. And that is the treatise of rights, Risalatul Huquq, which the Imam gives to us. No other Imam makes the effort, or is given the opportunity, I should say, to give to the people a treatise of rights, which explains comprehensively from the right of Allah until the lowest of the low, the huquq of every member of that chain, of that sequence of society. No one does this except Imam Sajjad alayhi salam. And there are so many things we could mention today about ways to implement his lesson in our life. But I picked this one because Risalatul Huquq, the treatise of rights, corresponds to how we should live our life today. Huquq comes from haq. Haq means truth and rightfulness. Truth itself is a good way of using the word haq, from which comes huquq. And we live today in a post-truth world. The world we live in now is called, in the discussions of postmodernism, a post-truth world, which means today there is no one truth left anymore. There is no one truth. There is my truth and your truth, and his truth and her truth. There is the truth of this community, truth of that group. There is no central authority anymore in the world. So much so, if there is dhulm happening in the world, they will give some language of human rights for that dhulm. If there's oppression in this world, they'll use the law or they'll use the systems of this world to justify that oppression. There's nothing left in the world which you can use to say this is wrong based on this standard. Religion has disintegrated in modern world as a source of authority. No king or ruler is left today who will openly say our rules come from the religion of Christianity or Islam in a meaningful way. And what that then leaves is a world where there is no one truth anymore. In that world, one in which we inhabit right now, where we are surrounded by systematic oppression, here comes Imam Sajjad alayhi salam. Imam Sajjad, especially Risalatul Huquq, offers for us a solution to that problem. The problem about how if the word has its own definition of human rights, and like I mentioned, it's a problem. Why? Because it does dhulm and then gives a language of rights to that dhulm. Then there's more dhulm and more language of human rights is given to that dhulm. And gradually there's no one left to speak for truth anymore, because even the word truth is part of that paradigm where you are trapped in it. I'll give you examples of this, of what I mean later. But not with Imam Sajjad, not with Risalatul Huquq. This is a whole different thing. Risalatul Huquq, the book of Treaty of Rights of Imam Sajjad alayhi salam, has its own derivation and its own background, and it serves a whole different function to what human rights does now. And like I said, in a world where there is no truth anymore, we have someone who says to us, here is the truth in these different situations. Are you proud enough of Ahlul Bayt to stand for the truth in those situations? Okay. To continue this issue more, have any of you heard someone say to you, does Islam, the religion of Islam, conform to human rights? Or is Islam compatible with human rights? We hear this all the time. And people bring up individual laws and features that, look, here's Islam, here's human rights. Either they will say, this is wrong because, look, Islam says one thing, but human rights says a whole different thing. And we should change what we are believing because of human rights and to be compatible with the modern world. Some people say this. Others do the opposite, say, look, here's what Islam says. Look, human rights says exactly the same thing. So how great we are that we are agreeing with human rights legislation in the world. Both these views don't understand something. Risalatul Huquq belongs to the Islamic tradition of rights and truth. It has its own genealogy, its own source. On the other hand, human rights in this world has its own source. Now, if they come together in certain points, we can say there are some convergences, but it doesn't mean, like I said, that we are then subject to all of Islam according to a whole different body of law. What I'm saying now might not seem as important as it will in a few moments, because all of our role as a modern Muslim depends on if we get this issue right. Are we as Muslims able to stand and live for our actual huquq in Islam without conforming to someone else's idea of how Islam should serve its rights? Everyone is arguing about what the right thing to do in the world is. Everyone's having this debate. Why don't we enter that fray with Risalatul Huquq and say, here's what we think the right thing to do is, with Imam Sajjad's words as our hujjah. So today, here's what we're going to do, inshallah. We're going to look at these two things as separately. The rights of Islam and human rights, because they are not the same thing in their origin. They come from different places. We'll then see when they do then come together and touch. How do they touch? Why do we have issues and tensions right now of when Islam says one thing and it seems like what is done at the time says something else? When they do converge and come together, how do we stand for Ahlul Bayt in the modern world proudly and say to the world, our religion from 1400 years ago continues to give us moral guidance in a world of fitna and fasad. And like I said, if we don't let Imam Sajjad's words into that discussion, we've not done justice on his words, because no other Imam made the effort or was given the opportunity to go through our rights in such a comprehensive way. It deserves to be known in the world. How can we make it known in the world, inshallah? For that, I will actually need your support. So if you are with me to begin, Sallu ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad.
Ladies can't hear you, so I need to raise the mic.
Okay, can they hear me now? The sisters must have missed the beginning, so I'll give a quick khulasa without all of the oratory. We need to understand, can they hear me? Can you check if they can hear me so then I know to continue or not, please, inshallah. Read Salawat ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad. We wish to understand and appreciate human rights in this world while also appreciating Islam. Are we good? Okay, inshallah. Together. And what we just said a few moments ago was the following. Islam has its own history. Human rights legislation has its own history. They come from different places. Now, if they happen to converge today, it doesn't mean that we are subject to human rights. Neither does it mean that we are against human rights. We just have a different tradition, a turath as it's known, and we should be proud of it. And we're just about to begin the discussion, inshallah. If everyone can hear me in the back, in the other hall, and hear, mashallah, an amazing new hall, I will begin and I will ask you permission, inshallah, because the first time we have gone through these issues together. But Peterborough, it feels like we are old friends at this point. So I'll ask you, if you're with me, one more time, Sallu ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad. In the religion of Islam, in this faith, huquq comes from haq. Haq itself means truth or reality, sometimes justice, but it means reality or truth. All of our rights come from one individual place. Allah is the truth, and from Him comes all other acceptances of the truth. Sometimes Quran says Allah is with the truth, or Allah does a truthful action. Okay, for example, فَذَلِكُمْ, one of the verses, فَذَلِكُمْ اللَّهُ رَبُّ الْحَقِّ. He is the Lord of Haqq. He's the true Lord, when they would do inkar of who the Lord is. But other times He's not just called the true Lord, He's called truth itself. فَذَلِكُمْ إِنَّ اللَّهُ هُوَ الْحَقِّ, Quran says. He is truth. This is very important. Not that He does truthful actions or He is the truthful Lord. Allah huwa al-haq. He is truth. وَمَا بَعْدَ, after Him, what is there? إِلَّا الضَّلَالَ, except falsehood or wrongdoing. There is only the truth. This is where we begin our discussion. Allah is the truth. Here's why I said He's not truthful. There's a reason for that. If we say Allah is truthful, like me and you can be truthful, it is a hal or a state or a quality which can pass easily. Today I'm truthful, tomorrow I'm not. These things are changing and cyclical all the time. But with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, His attributes are a part of His essence. They are a part of His actual reality. Which means God does not have an individual quality which sometimes changes to another quality and then to another quality and they go through cycles. It's not like that with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Whether it's His rahmat or His adl, whether it's Jalal or his Jamal. These distinctions we make of whether he's beautiful or he's Jalali or he's merciful or just, these are our own understanding of how he is. But in his essence, he is only one thing. Allahu laysa kamithlihi shay. Nothing like him. Haq is a word we use to describe that essence. That essence is haq. It is haq. We don't say he has truth. He is truth. And whatever's true on this world must gain its truth from the original truth. Just like all existence comes from the original existence. God is truth. Okay. In his essence, therefore, there are not pieces of truth next to pieces of love and mercy and power which can then be taken out from his essence. They exist as one central or as one being. For us then, haq, true haq, comes from that haq. Now I might not understand who Allah is. Therefore, I've not done justice to his haq. Allama Tatwa'i speaks about this. He says, look, when you say La ilaha illallah, Allama says this. If you think it means there is no God but Allah, which many of us say, you've not understood this phrase. Allama says, instead say, there is no deity worthy of worship which is haqiqat except Allah who is haqiqat. I might have an idea of God I've grown up hearing, and I think that's Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And when the time comes, Allah was never like my mental idea of him at all. Those people who are killing others in the name of God, do they actually know Allah to then kill for him? They don't know God. The idea itself is wrong. If someone dies without knowing Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, have they rejected God? They never knew God in the first place that they may reject him. Allama says, Allah is haq, he is true. There is one haqiqat of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Other things are just ideas of him. Okay. The verse I mentioned beginning is about this same issue I just said, how Allah is truth. The verse of Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim, Ya ayyuhalladhina amanu, attaqullaha haqqan. O people of Iman, worship Allah, go back to Allah. He is the haq, he is the truth. Tuqati, he is the actual truth itself. Therefore, وَلَا تَمُوتَنَّ, do not allow yourself to be killed إِلَّا وَأَنْتُمْ مُسْلِمُونَ, and except that you are Muslims. A Muslim is simply someone who is a person who is truthful. All you've done is found the truth and followed it. That's all Islam is. The relation between haq and siddiq. That's it. You have the truth and those who follow it. And you and me are people who are trying to, in our lives, piece together as much of haqiqat as we can to make the truth. Somehow from there we come to Risalatul Huquq, but there's one step in between. You have Haqqullah and Haqqun Nas. On the one hand, there's the rights of God, which I've just gone through. Ibadat, Rububiyyat, all those things. He's the Lord and our spiritual path is towards him. We know this. But then that same Lord gives us rights among each other as well. This is known as Haqqun Nas. In Nahj Balagha, Imam Ali Islam describes it as Insaf Allah wa Insaf al-Nas. For those of you who remember when we did the Majalis in Arbaeen last year, we spoke about the letter to Malik al-Ashtar. I mentioned this then. We don't get rights from anywhere except Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. That's why it's called Haqqullah wa Haqqun Nas. And therefore, when the time comes to go for judgment, we are told this in many narrations. There are people who can't go to heaven. Not because God won't forgive them, because there are others on this life who've not forgiven them for their dhulm towards them. And Allah will say, I will forgive you for the haqq that you went against myself. But what about Haqqun Nas? God will not forgive those. We need to forgive each other for those illnesses or those sicknesses we have among each other. Same with shafa'at. Ahlul Bayt say, there are some sins we can do shafa'at for you. Some sins we can't. We just won't do them for you. And of them, it could be this one. When you violate someone else's rights, they need to forgive you before you enter into Jannah. Haqqullah wa Haqqun Nas. From Haqqun Nas comes from how do we actually treat each other then in a way Allah wants us to behave. You see the sequence. You start with God. God is truth. God then allows truth. Truth comes from him. We have to act each other according to that same truth. So then you were able to ask, well, how do we follow the truth on this earth right now, which comes from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala? Here comes the Risalatul Huquq. It answers that question. How do you link yourself now to that haqiqat? God is truth. He is reality. But then there are some rights which come from that reality. So one of our companions asked Imam alayhi salam, can you explain to me what are our rights on this earth that we should be behaving by so that we're following God on this earth? There are two separate chains of narrations of Risalatul Huquq in which he answers this question. And they both begin by him saying, this is me speaking to my disciple who has asked me this question. Here's the answer for you now. And he gives 51 individual huquq that we live our lives by. One chain is from Sheikh Saduq in both Al-Khisal and Amali. One is from Tuhaf al-Uqul. Different chains, both authentic, come to us. They have some different versions in them, but the one which is commonly known now is looking at the main text found in As-Saduq. That text establishes for us how to behave in our society. 51 rights in that. 50 come from the first one. First one is the right of Allah. From that one right of God, 50 rights come from it. That's how it works. All of them go back to that one right. Haqqullah wa haqqun nas. That's our understanding. Therefore, maybe if we're being honest, rights is not the best translation of huquq here. You could say huquq is reality. And all we're doing is accepting the reality. There are 50 ways we should be treating others in reality. Whether we do or not is up to us. This is huquq. This is not human rights. I'm telling you as someone who works in the human rights field, it's my profession, it's not the same thing. That comes from a whole different place. Now, in our lives today, we have some Islamic issues which involve both Islam and human rights, and we have to deal with them. But the first way is dealing that Islam has its own way of understanding haqq, and human rights has its own way. Let me now describe to you how we have human rights on this earth today to then know how to deal with tension. Sallu ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad. Human rights, as it's known today, is arguably originated from the Greek philosophers, but I will argue in its current form, you'll find it from the 15th, 16th century until now. Okay, you have a thinker called Thomas Hobbes. Hobbes is a very famous thinker. Thank you so much, brother. A very famous thinker. And Hobbes was known for a number of theories which affect how the world is right now. One of those is called the theory of the state of nature. Hobbes believed if you leave human beings without any government whatsoever, no kings, no system of structure, it would fall into chaos. The state of nature, therefore, he said, would be a life which is nasty, brutish, and short. People fighting over resources, no system in place, no government. And when they go to who they really are inside, insan, when they're tested, are like this. They just want me, me, me. For Hobbes, the actual nature of humanity is a nature of self-interest and self-desire. Therefore, if there's no government in place, no system, no structure, this is how we would be. Some believe Hobbes saw this when he was traveling and saw certain communities which had no structure, tribal communities. And those tribes, because they didn't have government, were like this, chaotic. Although some post-colonial theories don't agree with this. Hobbes then says, well, in that case, why do we have government and rights and law if humans are like this? It's for protection of the individual. That although you want everything and everyone wants everything, we can't all have everything at once. So we decide to give up some freedom to some government to have authority over us. The example given today is, let's say we all want to drive as fast as we can in our roads. If there were no traffic lights and we all drove as fast as we wanted at all moments, there would be 100 crashes a day. Even though we're all practicing our freedom to drive as fast as we want, traffic lights, then are you giving up some of your freedom of driving to allow for protection of your rights, right of safety, so no one comes and crashes behind you? Same thing Hobbes was arguing. We need a system of government to stop us from killing each other. That's called the social contract. Social contract is this in Hobbes' theory. It's when people come together and agree, let's give up some of our rights to a government or power, and they'll choose how to run our society. Okay, first of all, before I move on, this is not compatible with Islam, this idea. It's not. On the one hand, although we have shahwat, desires inside of us, we also have a fitra inside of us. If you leave us to our own devices and you just leave insan completely, some argue we'd kill each other. But also there's in us a fitra which calls towards Allah and reason and truth and rightfulness and an imam of your time and all of those things. We would not necessarily delve into that lowest level of corruption if left alone. Also, Ayat al-Mutahhari says, in all insan there is a social spirit inside of them. A spirit of unity of society between different people. When the Quran says, to insan, Ya ayyuhal insan, inna khalaqnakum min sha'ubin dhakrin untha wa sha'ubin wa qaba'il li ta'arafu. That verse of ta'arafu I was coming to. It means this. Inside you, there is a voice which wants unity, whether people are men or women or tribes or cultures. And it comes from inside. And he mentions the example of the Holy Prophet, where the Prophet says, this ummah is like one body. If one part is in pain, the whole body feels hurt. This is from inside. So we don't believe, first of all, if we were left alone completely, we just kill each other. We don't believe this. But more than that, as well as there being a fitrah, when you have this idea that insan is essentially pessimistic, human rights then comes to control those rights of insan, which had it not been there, it would have run wild. Then you come to the Enlightenment theory. This idea continues to the era which is known as the era of the Renaissance. In this time, a theory which is so popular now erupts, which is called utilitarianism. What does it say? All of what is right and wrong comes down to one thing: whether or not it's giving the human being pleasure or pain. As you can tell, this is not the language of Islam, by making it clear to you how these are different fields which have by coincidence come together. Once you have the state of nature, insan is pessimistic. What comes next? Well, if we're pessimistic, I have my rights, you have your rights. How should we live? I have an idea, the utilitarianists say. I will live according to what gives me pleasure, and I will stay away from that which gives me harm. And all decisions come from this. So for example, something's only good if it gives me pleasure. And something's only bad if it harms me. There's no good or bad outside of me. Me. Do you see now why our world is so self-centric? Why it's all about the individual and the modern pursuit? Because of these theories for years which have become part of this culture. Me. I have my own culture. I have my own pain and pleasure. And as long as you don't come in the way of my life, you're fine. I have nothing by which I'll tell you what's right and wrong except my own self. Do you see how this is way different to Islam? It's all about the self now. Therefore, these thinkers like Jeremy Bentham and others would argue, all of human rights at that time is simply giving the individual more pleasure and not allowing them to come towards harm. This self-centric way of living. There's no such thing Amr bil Ma'ruf Nahi anil Munkar for this person. Because let's say I say to you, brother, I think you should be doing this thing. You'll simply say to me, I'm doing what I want in my life, and it gives me pleasure to do this thing. And it's not your business. I'm not causing you pain, am I? I'm not hurting you. And if I'm not hurting you, why are you telling me what to do? How many times have you heard this? It comes from these ideas. There's no need for enjoining good, forbidding evil if we have our own version of right and wrong. This idea goes further then to a much more dangerous level of how human rights law became what is called Rawlsian justice. Rawls was a philosopher who argued there's a link between living a liberal lifestyle and human rights. Liberalism is what? A society where you are permitting everything. I can dress how I want. I can speak how I want. I can leave religion if I want. No one can tell me what to do. It's my life. And we are liberal when we structure a whole society around the individual. Human rights, Rawls argued, is simply allowing the individual to do as much as they want for their own self. Then he argued, let's say you have a community which has no liberalism. They have their own way of living and their system is not from the West. Even if they have no liberalism, it's our right to go and civilize them to make them liberal like us. So now, when Christopher Columbus goes to America and finds those tribes which are living in their own way and dominates them, you see where it's coming from. We are civilized. We are liberal. We have our authority. They are uncivilized. They are backwards. They are from their country. So we go there and civilize them. Now come to Iraq war. We had the same thing. Same thing. We were arguing at that time, if the war's not legal, why are you going to war? We'd been told by the politicians, the reason is because that tyrant is oppressing his people. We are going to liberate them from his leader. Same idea Rawls argued about. If you find yourself with human rights and you see a illiberal community, it's your right to go and invade them to make them liberal again, or to make them liberal for the first time. Now come to the conclusion of us right now. What I have just mentioned, a very brief summary of human rights law in the UK, that became law. That is not the same as Islam. It's not. It's from a whole different way of thinking. The theory of insan is different. Theory of society is different. Theory of justice is different. It's all different. What did I say Islam is? It's from haqq of Allah. It comes from haqqun nas. That's not what I just said. But today, those two things mix together. How do they mix together? Sallu ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad. Today they mix together, they have convergences where we have issues in our modern life right now as Muslims in the West where we don't know what the right thing is. We don't know. And we choose where do we go to get authority to do the right thing. Okay. How do we run a country? How do we have a family? How do we run a society? How do we run a state? All of these things. As Muslims in the West, when we are asked, how do you think we should live our life? Why is it we don't automatically go to the non-Muslim and say, here's what Ahlul Bayt have taught us, here's how we live our lives? Why do we speak in the language of civilization, being modern, having authority? Why are we speaking that language? That's not how we grew up. We grew up with the language of the Quran and Ahadith. We should be proud of our tradition. At some point, we forgot how amazing our Ahadith were and thought we need to fit into others. And to fit in, we have to let go of what makes us so unique and all of the words of Ahlul Bayt and instead appear to be modern and civilized to be accepted by others. When that happened, we forgot one thing. We simply have a convergence, not a joint conclusion. Let's say two people believe in the same conclusion. Do they believe it for the same reasons? Not necessarily. Give you an example. Two people have one individual glass of alcohol. Okay. Neither of them drink that alcohol. One doesn't drink it because he says, my doctor told me it's not good for me. Because it's not good for me, it might cause me issues with my heart or with my mind. I'm not going to drink it. Second person says, I'm not going to drink it because Islam says haram, so I'm not going to drink it. Same action. Different reasoning to get there. One action is ibadat, one action is not necessarily. Just because it looks like the same doesn't mean they come from the same place. So for example, today, the right to protect life. We believe in it, non-Muslims believe in it, we all believe in this, protecting life. The reasons why we protect life are different. For example, in the Universal Declaration of Human Rights, the first charter says, these are rights which we hold as evident which are related to the dignity of man, protecting a human right. Okay. Is our idea of dignity the same as the idea of dignity of theirs? Not necessarily. A Western dignity is what? Live a life which is dignified, where no one is oppressing your rights to do whatever you want. But there's no need to do good. There's no need to do good. Why? As long as you're allowed to be free and do what makes you happy, you can be evil. But human rights means protect your right to be evil. Now come to Abu Abdullah in Karbala. Imam Hussain says, إِن لَمْ يَكُنْ لَكُمْ دِينٌ وَلَا تَخَافُونَ الْمَعَادِ فَكُونُوا كُنْتُ أَحْرَارًا فِي دُنْيَاكُمْ. If you have no religion, Imam Hussain says, and you have no لَا تَخَافُونَ الْمَعَادِ, no fear of the afterlife, at least be free in this world. Dignity starts in the end. Dignity in akhirah is true dignity, where you are free from all attachment other than Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. He says, if you don't have this in your life, where you don't care about Allah and humanity, and you don't care about Allah and going to heaven, at least don't allow yourself to live under a tyrant in your life. But look at where he starts. If you don't have fear of Allah, at least don't follow your tyrant. But the true purpose of dignity is to have fear of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. That's the rationale we come to this issue with. If you are going to sell your soul, at least sell it to the highest bidder. Imam Hussain says, your soul's been made for Jannah. Don't sell your soul for anything less than Jannah. But if you're not going to give yourself to God, at least don't sell yourself to the lowest of the low like Yazid. At least. We speak about dignity. We're speaking about your dignity in the eyes of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. The most dignified place you'll find insan is in sajda to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. That's our view of dignity. Now, if you don't want that, at least don't follow a tyrant where you can't have that. Here's where we come to it from. Now, if we agree with them that you shouldn't kill and take her life away, why do we agree? We agree because Abu Abdullah taught us every life is sacred, and if your right to dignity is the same as your right to life. Now, they might say, we don't care about dignity with Allah, but at least protect a life. At least know where we agree and don't agree. I'll give you another example to make it very, very clear on this. Muhammad wa ali Muhammad. Helping the poor. Helping the poor. We help the poor. Buddhists help the poor as well. It's part of their faith to help the poor. Christians, Marxists help. Everyone helps the poor for different reasons. We might all agree the poor are worth helping because they are vulnerable. We agree with this. Now, we also say that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has established for us a system of wilaya. Wilaya meaning social wilaya. And when someone's in pain, you feel hurt. Like the hadith mentioned of the Holy Prophet and the body. Or when Imam Sajjad alayhi salam says, read salat for the Imam alayhi salam. Imam alayhi salam says that if you wake up in the morning and you don't feel in your heart the suffering of the fellow believer, laysa minna, you're not from us Ahlul Bayt, you're not from our Shia. Which means, when I help the poor, I'm doing my duty to the body I am a part of. Okay, why does a Marxist help the poor? Why? They don't believe in this idea I just said. They help the poor because they believe there is a hierarchy in society and at the bottom are the oppressed. Okay? And those oppressed need to rise up and unshackle their chains against the bourgeoisie. Therefore, we help the poor to unshackle them and cause a revolution. Different theory. Buddhists, why does he help the poor? As well as why it's worth helping. Because we want to increase our karma so that when we come to our rebirth, we have more karma, and helping poor is a virtuous good action. All three of us help the poor for good reasons, but different reasons. You see what I'm trying to say? So when one of those controversial issues comes up, like women's rights in Islam, or abortion in Islam, or inheritance in Islam, ask yourself, do we want to do the right thing so that we fit in with others, or because Islam has its own law first and we want to follow Islam? And if we agree, we agree. If not, we don't mind because we've not lost anything if we don't agree with others. There are so many people who say that, Islam and feminism has a special relationship. Why? They say, look, Islam believes in female empowerment. Islam believes in rights of women in property. Islam believes in education for women. Islam believes in all of these things. And they say, you know what? So does feminism. Therefore, Islam must be feminist. And they say this. But then ask yourself, feminism also says, at least third wave and second wave feminism and this new wave feminism, that all religion is male dominated and patriarchal. All religion. So then they say, yeah, you know what? You're right. Look at Islam. Look at these prophets, they're male. Even though even though many prophets were female according to some narrations. They were male. Imams are male. Let's say, ulama, why are they male? Why are they male? And they'll use those arguments against Islam, when they should be saying Islam has its own idea of female rights. Feminism comes from Western liberalism. They have their ideas. On some issues we agree, on some we don't. We don't need their approval to feel good about ourselves. You see the point I'm trying to make? We don't need to look for other Western eyes to feel like we are advanced. Imam Sadiq is advanced for you. You don't need anyone else after him. That's where we have to go towards our minds. Now come back to this issue. Sometimes we genuinely disagree with issues in this world. How do we deal with them? Using Imam Sajjad alayhi salam. Salawatu ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad. We begin by saying Risalatul Huquq, the book of rights which we have in our homes, all of us have in our homes, is a way for us to unite with the haqq of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. The haqq of Allah. That's what it's for. Risalatul Huquq begins with what? One right. From that one right, all other rights come from. Imam says, no. Wallahu ya'lam. Akbarul haqq. The greatest of all rights is the right of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Know that His right is to be worshipped with no partner. And if He is worshipped in this way with sincerity, He will give to you all the affairs you need in this world and the afterlife. That's the main right of God. Worship Him with no partner. Then, He says, you have the right of yourself. That comes from the right of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And then He says, right number 2, the right of the self, of the individual, of insan, is to accept the first right of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Once you've accepted that right, know that if you turn yourself towards Allah, towards that Lord of yours, and give your mind and your heart towards Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and you do it with sincerity, you will find your whole body has rights towards that same Lord. Not just your mind. Then He says, you will find your ears have rights towards Allah, and your eyes have their own haqq towards Allah. And He'll find your hands and your legs have their haqq towards Allah, and your stomach and your private parts all have their own haqq towards Allah. Because just like you accept His tawheed, all those parts of your body must accept His tawheed as well. But then He says, and He continues, He gives 7 of those rights and goes in detail what is the precise right of each of your senses and your body parts. But then it's not just them, there's also actions our body does for Allah. They have rights too. So then He says, what's the right of Hajj? The right of Salat? The right of Zakat? What is the right of these actions of charity? And He goes through those rights. Then He says, if you do those rights, there must be rights of people as well, because people all have the same rights. So ask yourself, what are the rights of those who are in power over you? What are the rights of those who teach you and those who train you? And He says, in that case, look at the rights of those around you who are in the same tarbiyat. What about those who are servants to you? Or those who used to be servants and are no longer servants? What are their rights? And your right of your wife and your family. And then He says, in that case, what about the rights of your womb relatives? Right of your mother, your father, your brother, and your child. All those rights. These are 25 of His rights summarized, I've just said. Then He gives 26 more rights, all of which are of different features of society. For example, He says, what is the right of the one who you have power over and the one who has power over you? What's the right of your companion while he's sitting down and companion while he's standing? What's the right of you when you meet someone for the first time, a stranger? What's the right of your neighbor who's lived his whole life next to you? What are their rights? But then it expands more. What's the right of one who you give advice to? What's your right when giving advice to him? Then He says, when one gives advice to you, what's your right when you receive advice from him? When you go to give counsel to someone, what's your right when giving counsel to them? When they ask you for counsel, what's your right when choosing whether to give them counsel? Then He says, go further than this, what's your right? What's your right when someone does wrong towards you? What's your right when you have done wrong towards them? What's your right when your enemy in your life is in front of you and he is wrong? What's your right when enemy is there and you are wrong? What are your rights? Then He says, expand larger. What's the right of all those who live and die by what you live and die by with? And what's the right of all those who live around you but don't believe in what you believe in and are in the dar of Islam? From one right of Allah, look how many other rights opened up. From one. We began by saying Allah is haqq, Allah exists. And somehow from the existence I learned about rights of myself, my body, the movement of my body, those who move with me, those who live with me, and those who will be there when I die. All of those came from one right, the right of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Now come back to modern life. I'm going back and forth to show you how different these are. Does anyone today care about the right of your private parts in society, or the right of your eyes, or the right of your hands? When they are engaging in the worst sin, why would they care about these things? What's their priority with these things? Have you ever heard anyone who's not a Muslim or not from Imam Sajjad Islam's path say, what's the right of the companion while he sits down, the companion while he stands? It's not from the way that they think. If we agree on some of the rights I just mentioned, like for example, the right of the one who is harming you, not to harm him back, for example, that makes sense. Or family, for example, Imam Sajjad says the right of your father, the right of your dad, is that you should know he is your root. Your father is your root. Whatever good deeds you do are ascribed back towards him. Many faiths have respect for parents. The right of your mother, Imam Sajjad says, know about your mother. When she was thirsty, she gave you water. When she was hungry, she gave you food. She would rather have been unclothed if you had clothes. She was awake so that you could sleep. She gave you the mercy of her heart, and if you try and try, you will never be able to finish what she has done for you. Imam Sajjad says this. So some other faiths respect mothers, and we agree with them on some things. But for example, some things I mentioned, they just won't have in their mind. It won't be a priority for them. In those things, why do I need to seek their approval? Why? I'll make it very clear for all of you. When it comes to how Muslims have lived after the colonial time, we had a habit where we would always look towards the West for approval, to feel good about ourselves. For example, beauty. Very good example. And all of you know what I'm going to say. Or it will make sense to you. The beauty industry right now, fashion industry, is one of the most highest funded industries you'll find in the world. Okay. In that industry, bleaching of the skin to make it lighter is a very big economy. Products and procedures and machines built to make your skin lighter. Products are given, especially for females, to straighten their hair so that it's not in its natural state. Okay. There are people spending money on these things. Nose jobs. There are people who spend so much money to change the way their body has been made. Why? It doesn't fit with an idea of beauty they have been fed their whole lives. From the dolls they play with when they are young, to the people they're seeing on Instagram when they are youth, to the people they're interacting with when they are older. There is one idea of beauty, and it's a Western notion of beauty. It's white, it has straight hair, it has a certain body type and a body face. And young people are killing themselves to fit that version of beauty. Whereas the hadith tells us, Inna Allahu ta'ala jamilun yuhibbul jamal. God himself is beauty, and he loves beauty. Allah says this, he's beauty. I, as a young person, can tell you straight up, there are people right now who don't like how they look because they don't look like the Western notion of beauty. Why are they looking there to be validated when Allah himself says, I am beauty and I love the beauty in you? Why is that not enough for us? Why are we looking elsewhere? It's because the Western structure wants us to agree with them to feel good about ourselves. If I don't look like that, I don't feel like I'm beautiful. I feel like I'm ugly or I'm backwards. Same thing society, our language. We have so many amazing languages. I bet in this room, there's probably 5 to 10 languages all of us can speak collectively. There's one uncle who probably speaks all of them in this room. Imagine, why are we so ashamed of these languages in public? That if someone comes from a different country and they speak a little bit differently, we make fun of them because of how they speak. In media, I remember one of these politicians was saying, I feel uncomfortable sitting in a train when I hear people speaking other languages around me. Our languages collectively can have 5, 6, 7, 10 definitions of one word which has one meaning in English. Why are we ashamed of our language? Why do we teach our children proudly? You know, having English lectures is so amazing, but I was forced as a kid to go to Urdu majalis for a reason, so that I could speak and understand and how to speak to my own grandparents. There's a reason for this. If you lose your language, you lose your tradition. There's a reason why we and our languages don't feel proud to speak them publicly loudly sometimes. You know that small shivering of the voice where you kind of hush your voice when you're speaking your own language in public or in school because kids might make fun of you. This is because we're looking to them for validation of something we should be proud of. Same thing running a government. When we Muslim countries were under power for so long from non-Muslim countries, the moment we got power, we made constitutions like their constitutions, courts like their courts, systems like their systems, in order to fit in. And I'm here to tell you, you don't need to fit in when you have Risalatul Huquq. Imam Sajjad gives you your own purpose and honor. It's an honor to say, I believe because Imam Sajjad says this. I stand because Abu Abdullah says this. I don't need anyone to be happy with me. It doesn't change my heart whatsoever. I don't need another book to agree with my book to be happy with what's in my books. I have my books already. I don't need them to be happy with myself. Same way, when we stand for justice today, I don't need to use the language of them to say that I am just. Islam gives you justice. It gives you qist and adl and insaf and haqq. We should be so proud of these things. Do you know how much blood was shed so that we have this one Risalatul Huquq? All of Karbala leads to Risalatul Huquq. Imam comes up from Karbala, from the Battle of Karbala, and he has to use this grief and sadness in a way that is teaching Islam so everyone knows what happened on Ashura. So he does 3 things. 1, Majlis al-Hussain alayhi salam. He makes Majlis established, which is why we have Majlis. 2, dua. Sayf Sajjadiyah. That's why we have dua right now. Because he realizes the people are not spiritual anymore because they were ready to stand against the Imam of their time. And third, they don't know their rights. And Risalat al-Huquq, which I encourage all of you to go home and read, gives you so beautifully 50 rights which affect every aspect of our lives, which all go back to one origin. Allahu al-Haq. God is the truth. And all rights come from that truth. I owe it to the Imam alayhi salam to stand for that truth, no matter who is standing against me and who wants me on their side. I should be with the Imam of my time, inshallah. Sallallahu ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad. This Imam, Sajjad alayhi salam, suffered immeasurably so that we may have a life of dignity today. We would not know Karbala or Ashura if it was not for the clanking of those chains in Sham and Kufa. Every step he takes on those days is so that we may walk proudly with our own footsteps. Imam Sajjad alayhi salam in his life suffers immeasurably. But as all of you know, today is the day of the 20th after the day of Ashura. The Shuhada of Karbala, which the Imam alayhi salam sees and witnesses and buries, they are the ones who live with dignity and honor. But now come to Ashura, those bodies are now lying on the plains of Karbala. The bodies of men like Burair and Nafi and Hur and Habib and Muslim, of Ali Akbar and Qasim and Aun and Muhammad. And there's one body near the Furat as well which does not come back near. And chief of them is the body of an Imam who has so many wounds in his body. When he lies on the ground, neither he's touching the ground, neither is he touching the sky. This Imam of our time. All those shuhada are now lying on the plains of Karbala on the day of Shami Ghariba. The narrations tell us at that time the custom is to trample the bodies of the shuhada of Karbala so that you show that you are the victors of that battle. But when the time comes to trample their bodies, a man comes from the tribe of Asad, Bani Asad, and says, well, Habib is from our tribe, move the body of Habib. We will not allow our eyes to watch a man from our tribe be trampled his body. Then a man from the tribe of Riyah, he comes and says, well, Hur is from our tribe, move his body as well, for we cannot allow to see a man from our own tribe's body being trampled in front of our eyes. Then they say one by one, all of the companions of Imam Hussein's bodies are moved away, so only the family is left. When the family is left, Shimon himself comes and says, Abbas was my enemy, but he's from the same family of my family. Move the body of Abbas, don't trample the body of Abbas. Then they say Ali Akbar's mother is related to Abu Sufyan. Move Ali Akbar's body away. One by one, either a mother or a father's tribe comes and moves the body until there's only one body left after all of those bodies. No one comes and tries to move that body. Why? His mother is Zahra, his father is Ali. There is no one left to stand for Banu Hashim. And then they say, no one comes to stop the body of Abu Abdullah. Umar ibn Sa'ad says, who will trample this body of Hussain? The narrations tell us, 10 men stand and say, we have spent all night sharpening the hooves of our horses for this one moment. One by one they go and they trample this body. Now comes Imam Sajjad, he says, I was in my tent and I heard a loud cracking noise. Auntie Zainab came and says, Sajjad, what's this noise? Imam says, this is the noise of the ribs of my father cracking in Karbala. No wonder Imam Zaman alayhi salam says, I send salam on those left ribs which were crushed into that right chest, and those right ribs crushed into that left chest. Now somehow Imam Sajjad must walk past that body and go towards Kufa. He sees these shuhada lying there. It's been 20 days since their bodies have been trampled. They're lying there. As they leave, the time comes to bury those bodies. Now who's going to bury those bodies of these shuhada? Which man is left to bury them? And all of you know, only an imam can bury the body of an imam. There are different reasons how they were buried. One narration says that when Imam Hussain alayhi salam bought the land of Karbala, he asked all of them, this land, there will come a time when I will say the words, Hal min Nasirin yansurna. When I say that every man from Banu Asad should run away. But then he says, after you've gone, when you come back, you'll see my body lying there on the plains of Karbala. There'll be no ghusl and no kafan. I ask you, if you can, at least put one piece of cloth on my body, for I am the son of Zahra. It's not right, my body should have no kafan. Then he says, even if you don't come, ask your children, when they're playing near me, come towards my body, place small stones on my body as they play there. Some say that was how they buried. Another narration says how they say when Zuhair bin Qayn was killed, the wife of Zuhair sends one of her ghulam, go and take this kafan, at least put my husband's body in a kafan, let him have a kafan on his body. They say like this ghulam of Zuhair runs with a kafan, goes into the maqtal, and he comes back and says, oh wife of Zuhair, I still need one more kafan. Why? She says, I've just given you a kafan to bury my husband. Why have you come back? He says, I went to bury Zuhair with the kafan you gave me, but while walking I saw the body of Hussain while I was walking, and I thought to myself, how can Zuhair be buried when Hussain has no kafan? So I gave Hussain that kafan and came back. The third, he says, when Imam Sajjad went to that maqtal, he saw there were so many bodies buried, but no one knew where they were buried. So Imam al-Islam came and said, this person is Ali Akbar, he was my brother, put the name Ali Akbar here. Then he says, this person is Qasim, put the name Qasim here. He goes one by one and says, who is whose grave? Then he looks and says, you see that body towards Furat? That's my uncle Abbas. When you go there, bury his body here. Then he says, he goes to one grave of Abu Abdullah, he kneels down. The grave's already been dug off Abu Abdullah. Sajjad goes on his knees, moves his hands and sees a qabr has already made for Abu Abdullah. He lowers the body down, buries the body, and then writes with his fingers, Hadha al-Hussain qatru atshan. This is Hussain, he was killed while he was thirsty. That's how Sajjad buries them. Now look, he goes to Kufa, he goes to Sham. As he's going, all those shuhada who we are mourning for today, their heads are on these spears walking alongside them. Yani Sajjad looks up and sees all his family around them. So when they asked him, Sajjad, how long will you cry for? Yaqub cried for Yusuf. He says, I have seen 18 Yusufs from my family killed in front of me. Not just killed, I've seen their bodies on spears from Kufa to Sham. When they come to Sham, all you know that final riwayat which they say what? When the time comes to give those heads back to the people, one by one they take these heads. One woman takes Zuhair bin Qayn, one takes Habib, one mother takes a 6-month-old child's head and holds that head. One by one they take head after the other. When that of Ali Akbar comes, all the women stand and start crying and mourning for this shaheed. They say there comes a time everyone is quiet, for the head of Abbas has come. His eyes are closed. Why? Zainab has no rida. How can Abbas see Zainab like this? Then that last head comes of Abu Abdullah. All the women stand and start wailing. One person strikes her head, one her chest, one falls to the ground. They say after all the heads have been carried, there's only 2 heads which remain. No one has come to gather these 2 heads. The enemy say, has the mother died of these 2 young children? For no one comes. Zainab stands and says, this is On and this is Muhammad, but I will not cry for them, for I am still crying for my brother Hussain. Inna lillahi wa inna ilayhi raji'un, ridhan wa qadahi wa taslim bi amri. Ya Allah, Ya Allah, Ya Allah, for the sake of Ahlul Bayt, allow us to all to live and die according to their footsteps, Ya Allah. Ya Allah, our tears we have shed, may Allah accept and forgive them and forgive all of our sins for the sake of these tears. Ya Allah, this azah which has been organized for all those who have passed away, including the majlis in the afternoon, and for all those in our community, may all of their souls be elevated through these majalis, inshallah. And finally, our akhir dua, our most important dua, Ya Allah, allow this majalis, what we have learned, what we have mourned for, let it make us closer and closer to the dhuhr from Zamana alayhi salam, inshallah. Allahumma inni suluka bihaqqi Fatima, biha ba'ali abniha, wa sirr musta'awduhu fiha, عند السلام على محمد وعجل فرجهم ماتم حسين.
Ya Hussain, Ya Hussain, Ya Hussain, Ya Hussain, Ya Hussain, Ya Hussain, Ya Hussain. Ya Rabb koi masooma zinda na tanha ho, Ya Rabb koi masooma zinda mein na tanha ho, یا رب کوئی معصومہ زندہ میں نہ تنہا ہو، یا رب کوئی معصومہ زندہ میں نہ تنہا ہو، یا رب کوئی معصومہ زندہ میں نہ تنہا ہو، یا رب کوئی معصومہ زندہ میں نہ تنہا ہو، یا رب کوئی معصومہ زندہ میں نہ تنہا ہو، یا رب کوئی معصومہ زندہ میں نہ تنہا ہو، پابند نہ ہو آہیں، ہے پابند نہ ہو آہیں، رونے پہ نہ پہرا ہو، یا رب کوئی معصومہ زندہ میں نہ تنہا ہو، یا رب کوئی معصومہ زندہ میں نہ تنہا ہو، یا رب کوئی معصومہ زندہ میں نہ تنہا ہو، جس کو نیند آتی شبیر کے سینے پر، جس کو نیند آتی شبیر کے سینے پر، زندہ در زندہ ہے زندہ در زندہ، اس کے لیے قضا ہو، یا رب کوئی معصومہ زندہ میں نہ تنہا ہو، یا رب کوئی جیو ماتمی ہو زندہ میں نہ تنہا ہو، یا رب کوئی معصومہ زندہ میں نہ تنہا ہو، زندانوں سے آتی تھی آواز سے سکنے کی، زندانوں سے آتی تھی آواز سے سکنے کی، جیسے کہ سکینہ کو ہے، جیسے کہ سکینہ کو ہر زندان رو رہا ہو، یا رب کوئی معصومہ زندہ میں نہ تنہا ہو، یا رب کوئی معصومہ زندہ میں نہ تنہا ہو، یا رب کوئی معصومہ زندہ میں نہ تنہا ہو، یا رب کوئی معصومہ زندہ میں نہ تنہا ہو، ٹکرائے نہ وہ کیوں کر زندہ کی دیواروں سے، ٹکرائے نہ وہ کیوں کر زندہ کی دیواروں سے، بھائی سے اور پھوپھی سے ہے، بھائی سے اور پھوپھی سے جس کو جدا کیا ہو، یا رب کوئی معصومہ زندہ میں نہ تنہا ہو، یا رب کوئی معصومہ زندہ میں نہ تنہا ہو، یا رب کوئی معصومہ زندہ میں نہ تنہا ہو، زندانوں میں اے نجفی یاد آئی سکینہ کی، زندانوں میں اے نجفی یاد آئی سکینہ کی، دل رو رو کہہ رہا ہے دل رو رو کہہ رہا ہے، اب نہ اجالا ہو، یا رب کوئی معصومہ زندہ میں نہ تنہا ہو، یا رب کوئی معصومہ زندہ میں نہ تنہا ہو، یا رب کوئی معصومہ زندہ میں نہ تنہا ہو، یا رب کوئی معصومہ زندہ میں نہ تنہا ہو، تھی جس کو نیند آتی شبیر کے سینے پہ، تھی جس کو نیند آتی شبیر کے سینے قضا ہو یا رب کوئی معصومہ زندہ میں نہ تنہا ہو یا رب کوئی معصومہ زندہ میں نہ تنہا ہو یا رب کوئی معصومہ زندہ میں نہ تنہا ہو یا حسین 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 یا حسین
سجاد میں زینب ہوں میرے سر پہ ردا کوئی نہیں بازار جفا سجاد لب ہوں میرے سر پہ ردا کوئی نہیں بازار جفا سجاد میں زینب میرے سر پہ ردا کوئی نہیں بازار جفا مجمع ہے کوفیوں کا میرے چلنے کی راہ کوئی نہیں بازار جفا سجاد میں میرے سر پہ ردا کوئی نہیں بازار سجاد میرے سر سے 9 بار چھنی چادر بلوے میں نبی زادی پھر بائی گئی در در مل جائے ردا مجھ کو اور میری دعا کوئی نہیں بازار جفا سجاد لب ہو میرے سر پہ ردا کوئی نہیں بازار جفا سجاد میرے سر پہ ردا کوئی نہیں بازار سجاد چلو کیسے لاکھوں ہے تماشائے یاد آتا ہے رہ رہ کے عباس میرا بھائی فریاد کرو کسے اب تیرے سوا کوئی نہیں بازار جفا سجاد سجاد میں زینب ہوں میرے سر پہ ردا کوئی نہیں بازار جفا سجاد میں زینب میرے سر پہ میرا بازار جفا معلوم ہے ادا کو غازی کی بہن ہوں میں بے دست ہے وہ غازی پابند رسن ہوں میں یاد آئی وفا اس کی جب پاس رہا کوئی نہیں بازار جفا سجاد نب ہو میرے سر پہ ردا کوئی نہیں بازار جفا سجاد بازار جفا سجاد میں زینب سورۃ المبارکۃ فاتحہ السلام علیکم یا ابا عبداللہ السلام علیکم ابن رسول اللہ السلام علیکم ابن فاطمہ الزہرا سید نساء العالمین السلام علیکم حسن المجتبی السلام علیکم یا شہداء کربلا جميعا ورحمۃ اللہ وبرکاتہ السلام علیکم یا مولا وابن مولا السلام علیکم یا غریب الغرباء السلطان والحسن علی ابن موسى الرضا کن شفیعنا وشفیعنا وعلینا فی یوم الجزاء ورحمۃ اللہ وبرکاتہ السلام علیکم یا مولانا یا صاحب الزمان الامان 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 من خلیفۃ الرحمن شریک القرآن کعبۃ الایمان امام الانس والجان ورحمۃ اللہ وبرکاتہ بسم اللہ الرحمن الرحیم اللهم كن لوليك الحجة ابن الحسن صلواتك عليه وعلى آبائه في هذه الساعة وفي كل ساعة وليا وحافظا وكائدا وناصرا ودليلا وعينا حتى تسكنه أرزك طوعا وتمتعه فيها طويلا. اللهم صل على